Hello everyone, and welcome to China Discovery Channel. Recently, the Migrant Workers Monitoring Survey report, released by China's National Bureau of Statistics, has once again brought this massive yet often overlooked social group back into the public spotlight. According to the data, the total number of migrant workers in China reached 299.7 million in 2024, edging close to the 300 million mark and setting a historic high. Behind this figure lies a complex picture of economic and social transformation, reflecting the deep structural evolution of China's labor market. From the data, the report reveals four major structural challenges faced by the migrant worker population. 1. Total number approaching 300 million. Labor commodification deepens. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, migrant workers refer to rural residents with agricultural household registration, hukou, who are employed in non-agricultural sectors either locally or in other regions. In 2024, the total number of migrant workers in China reached 299.7 million, including 178.71 million who work outside their hometowns, and 121.02 million who work locally. Both the total number and the subgroups, local and outbound, are at record highs. Many might assume that with ongoing urbanization and a shrinking rural population, the number of migrant workers should be gradually decreasing. However, the reality is quite the opposite. This counterintuitive phenomenon is rooted in the deepening trend of labor commodification. In recent years, more and more rural residents who previously worked in agriculture have shifted into non-agricultural sectors or migrated to cities for work. The marginalization of agriculture, combined with the absorption capacity of the non-agricultural economy, has transformed the identity of farmer into a transitional status between rural and urban livelihoods. This phenomenon reveals rural households' high dependence on cash income, as well as the normalization of rural laborers working in non-agricultural jobs and being away from home year-round. It also indicates that despite a declining number of rural hukou holders, rural registered workers still play a crucial role in sustaining urban operations and underpinning China's manufacturing and service sectors. 2. Structural shifts within the migrant worker group raise deep concerns. A particularly alarming trend is the rapid aging of the migrant worker population. Data shows that in 2024, 94.71 million migrant workers were over the age of 50, accounting for 31.6% of the total. In contrast, in 2008, this proportion was only 11.4%, totaling 25.7 million. In just 16 years, the number of older migrant workers has increased by nearly 69 million, almost tripling, a figure roughly equivalent to the entire population of France. This means that a large portion of China's frontline manufacturing and construction labor force is rapidly entering middle to older age. Given that migrant workers are often engaged in physically demanding jobs under harsh conditions, those over 50 are increasingly unable to meet the physical demands of many high-intensity roles. They face a host of social challenges, including obsolete skills, increased risk of unemployment, declining incomes, and lack of medical and retirement security. Even more worrying is the emergence of a structural gap. The number of young migrant workers continues to decline. According to the data, in 2008, there were 79.57 million migrant workers aged 21 to 30. But by 2024, this number had fallen to 47.36 million, a drop of more than 32 million. This trend is especially devastating for manufacturing sectors that rely on a large, young labor force. Electronics factories, assembly lines, and other high-intensity jobs have traditionally had high demand for young workers. But declining birth rates, rising education levels among young people, and a growing unwillingness to engage in traditional blue-collar work have turned this age group into a scarce resource. The consequences are already being felt. A labor shortage in manufacturing is pushing companies to lower recruitment standards. Many factories have been forced to raise the upper age limit for hiring from 35 to 40, or even 50 years old. In the Pearl River Delta and Yangtze River Delta regions, many electronics assembly lines are now operated by middle-aged men and women, breaking the previous tradition of relying primarily on young workers. 3. Stagnant income growth. GDP growth not reflected in migrant workers' earnings. For a country to expand domestic demand, its working population, especially at the grassroots level, must genuinely have money to spend. However, the reality of migrant workers' income growth is far from optimistic. According to statistics, the average monthly income of migrant workers in 2024 was 4,961 yuan, approximately $689, while migrant workers working away from home earned an average of 5,634 yuan, approximately $782.50 per month. These represent year-on-year increases of 3.8% and 3.5%, respectively. However, China's GDP grew by 5% during the same period. This indicates that migrant workers' income growth has lagged behind GDP growth, meaning that the benefits of economic development have not been fully reflected in income distribution for this group. From historical data, this trend of income growth lagging behind GDP growth is not new. In 2020, due to the impact of the pandemic, the income growth rate of migrant workers dropped sharply. However, in 2024, even in the absence of major economic disruptions, their income growth rate remained at only 3.8%, marking the second lowest level in recent years. By contrast, between 2009 and 2015, the income growth of migrant workers significantly outpaced GDP growth. This reflected the government's compensatory distribution policies at the time. During that period, authorities actively worked to reduce the urban-rural income gap and increase the income of low-income groups. But today, with economic growth slowing and employment structure shifting, reforms on the distribution side seem to have reached a bottleneck. In other words, when income growth fails to keep up with economic growth, the consumption capacity of migrant workers is suppressed, which in turn hinders the expansion of domestic demand and economic transformation. Fourth, population outflow in Northeast China signals a shift in migration patterns. The proportion of migrant workers engaged in interprovincial migration has begun to rise again, with a significant increase in the share of outbound migrant workers from the northeastern region. In recent years, as economic development accelerated in the central and western regions of China, many migrant workers no longer needed to travel far to coastal areas for work, instead opting to find employment closer to home. As a result, the number of interprovincial migrant workers had been steadily declining. However, 2024 data showed the first rebound. The proportion of outbound migrant workers from the Northeast rose from 30.9% last year to 33.6%. In other words, the three northeastern provinces are experiencing a new wave of net population outflow. This reflects not only employment pressure, but also highlights regional development imbalances. The Northeast has long struggled with issues such as a single industry structure, and over-reliance on state-owned enterprises, and a lack of market vitality. Although revitalization policies have been intensified in recent years, the overall growth in job opportunities remains sluggish, especially for high-quality positions, forcing a large number of young and middle-aged workers to once again migrate southward for employment. The outflow of population from the Northeast affects more than just individual employment. It may accelerate regional aging, shrink consumption, increase fiscal pressures, and become a long-term constraint on regional economic development. According to comments from economists, China's migrant workers are the unsung heroes behind the country's economic miracle over the past 40 years. With their youth and hard work, they built the skyscrapers of cities, assembled export products, and supported every corner of the service industry. They are not just laborers, but also the pillars of their families, the hope of rural areas, and the foundation of social stability. Now, as this group ages, faces stagnant incomes, and suffers from regional imbalance, we must not allow them to be silenced. True high-quality development must include improvements in their dignity, rights, and quality of life. Only a nation that respects its laborers can secure its future. This is China Discovery. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you, and see you next time.